Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Don Gulling at Verteks Consulting. Thank you for joining us today for this Mitel Advanced Contact Center training. We appreciate your joining, and we're looking forward to the content. Today's topic is an Advanced Contact Center training class, so this is definitely for folks who either want to know more about what Contact Center can do for them or want to get behind the scenes and really get deep in the weeds on Contact Center. Because of the advanced nature of the topic, I've also asked our guest speaker today, Mike DuPhily, to be the presenter. A lot of you already know Mike and have worked with him in the past. Mike's been with Verteks Consulting over 15 years. He's a very experienced Mitel and network engineer. He's implemented, many of these Mitel contact centers. He's done this scripting, script editing, and so on in a lot of them. Mike has also a lot of experience just in IT generally, both in database administration and in Windows Server and VMware administration. So he's got a depth and breadth of knowledge that I think really lends itself well to a topic of this nature. So the agenda today, and I sent that out in the email, is we're going to focus heavily on the contact center and specifically GCCS script editing. The agenda is going to cover call flow redundancy, scripts and their uses, kind of interface basics, creating a survey application, and custom reporting. And lastly, I want to say thank you. Thanks for joining this webinar. Thanks for being a client. Not a client, thanks for having enough interest to attend today. I'm going to stop my presentation and make Mike the presenter, and then Mike is going to take it away from here.
All right. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for the great introduction, Don. What we're going to be covering today, as Don mentioned, is some advanced topics in contact center. So some of these were things we wanted to touch on during the first webinar we did a few months ago and just didn't have time. Some of these are specific questions that came out of that first webinar, and we definitely know there's going to be more. So we're looking forward to part 3 here once we get that going. So kind of the first topic, and this was a question from the last one, is just a little bit more in-depth look at call flow in ECC, especially as it pertains to the interaction with the PBX. So kind of how we go from taking a call from just the Mitel system, a normal phone call, and bringing it into the call center, and how that interaction moves back and forth there. Also touch a little bit on the ECC redundancy. I know probably some of you out there have a redundant ECC server, kind of a backup ECC server. Some of you may not, but touch a little bit on how that works kind of technically in the system here. So I prepared a little kind of animation slide to demonstrate the basics here, and I'll touch on a few concepts as we go through. So when we have a call coming into the contact center, it's always just going to start as a regular call coming into the system. So we've got an incoming call from the trunk switch, could be a PRI, a SIP trunk, basically a call coming into the system. Could even be an internal call, someone dialing the extension for the call center directly. And where that's going to go is to what we call your IRN route point. In the system, in Director, these are set up as route points. And these are basically extensions that live on another server, is the idea of a route point. And in this case, it's going to be an extension that we set up that's basically just there to get a call into the call center. So that's really the point of integration, are these route points that we set up in the regular Mitel Director. Correspondingly, in the contact center director, there is what we call an IRN, just an IRN there, but they both match. So the IRN in contact center director matches the route point in the PBX director. You'll notice I changed the color here as well. So obviously our good old Schwartel orange there is kind of fully PBX, and our new Mitel blue, this is our call headed into the contact center here. So once we pass the call onto that IRN route point, the call is now in control of the contact center server, and kind of everything that's happening to it happens to it on the contact center server. Now, once we accept that call in the IRN, Now we're going to look at what is the destination of that IRN, and this is in Contact Center Director. We talk about scripting here in a few minutes. That destination could be a script, could be a GCCS script. It could just be a service directly, so we just want to send it to some agents. Generally, the destination is just going to be a service in that case. But we're going to look at the destination of that IRN and make a decision about where to send it next. So for the purposes of this example, I'm just sending it to a service, and we're going to pretend it's in that service. We're going to look for an available agent, and shoot, all of our agents are busy. So we have to queue this call. At that point, we send it back to another route point. But this is a set of route points that have a different purpose. We call these the IVR ports. These are also a group of route points that are set up and assigned to the contact center server, but their purpose is different from the IRN route points. The purpose of the IVR port route points is basically it's an extension that the contact center server can park a call on anytime that the server itself needs to send some kind of media to the call. So that could be music on hold, announcements or messages that we play through a script potentially. Anytime that the call is waiting on the server, it's going to be sitting on one of these IVR port route points. Usually this is like a group of 20 to 50 in most cases for most servers. It could be more route points that are set up and just a place where it can park a call if it's queuing it or playing a message or doing something with that call that's not, just transferring it to an agent. So while they're sitting on that IVR port, they could be hearing music on hold. We could be potentially moving this caller through different scripts, again, through the GCCS scripter system. All sorts of things we could be doing with that call while the server's got control of it. So in this case, we're just waiting for an available agent. So now an agent becomes available. And now we're going to, at this point, now the call is going to leave the contact center server and just be transferred now to that agent. And again, I'm changing it orange here because it might not seem like it, but it's important to realize that once we do send that call to the agent, the contact center server doesn't really have any control over that call anymore. At that point, the agent's fully in control of that call. So, either they'll speak and hang up or they can transfer it somewhere else. But our ability to kind of work with that call once we send it to an agent is limited. And so this is kind of a basic a call flow for most situations. I said the one thing I wanted to point out here is just kind of the interaction of these different route points. Again, the first step is to get it into the contact server. We use these IRN route points. And then while the server's doing things with that call, it's going to be using those IVR port route points to play media and things like that. If you're looking at these route points in the PBX director, you might not immediately see a difference between them. They both just look like route points, but they are used for different purposes. And when we look here at the contact center director, I'll point that out a little bit. One other use or interaction that these route points are very important for is when we're dealing with a redundant server system. What I'm going to do here is end my slideshow real quick and bring up our system and just show you a few things in director there that are important for redundant server systems. This is our own system here at Verteks. I can find my mouse here. There it is. And we actually don't have a redundant server system ourselves here, but all the bits and pieces for it exist. So I can show it to you. So with a redundant system, what we're generally going to have is basically a second contact center server that's sitting in the background, basically in a hot standby mode. It's generally not going to be taking calls or doing anything unless the primary fails. In that kind of hot standby mode, what's basically going on is just a database sync between the primary server and the secondary server, so that the secondary server is up to date with everything going on the primary in case it fails. once, let's say something were to happen to my primary server here. If that were the case, what that looks like to the kind of primary system in here. I'm just going to log into our director here. What that looks like is an unanswered call to the Mitel system. So again, our calls come into these route points. Under features, call control route points. So our demo IRN here. So this is an IRN route point. So this would be an ingestion route point here to get a call in. Ordinarily, when a call hits this route point, it's answered by the call center server. When we have redundancy set up, and if that primary server fails, what ends up happening is the primary server here does not answer that call. So with a redundant server, what we do is set up a second set of IRNs, of route points, that live on that redundant server, the second server. And in the Mitel Connect director here, what we'll do is configure the IRNs on the primary server so that if there's no answer or busy, in our case, this is going to help desk group, but we would direct this to the secondary IRN. We call the secondary IRN that lives on that redundant server. And this is how calls fail over from the primary to the redundant. It's basically a function here in the PBX that says, if the primary server doesn't answer, send the call to the IRN for the second server. This is also probably the most common point of failure for this. A lot of times when we're setting up new IRNs or new groups in contact center, we'll go through and we'll set it up on the primary and we'll forget to either set up the secondary, or we'll set up the secondary, we'll forget to put it in here as the busy no answer destination on the primary IRN. And in that scenario, what would end up happening is if it were forgotten to be put in here and the call can't be answered by the primary server, you'll get what we call the backup auto attendant. The caller will hear basically a message saying, if you know your party's extension, you dial it now. You've probably heard that before in some cases. And the usual culprit is we've forgotten to set that up here. In Contact Center Director, for our IRNs, on our primary server here, we have the option, if we do have a redundant server, and we want to set up a second IRN, we would check off this IRN on secondary server box. And again, this would be a separate route point. So by checking this box, I'm essentially saying that this is an IRN that lives on my secondary server, if I were to check this. The IRN number could not match the IRN extension number that exists on the primary. They have to be separate. So they're two separate IRNs, two separate servers. But checking this box here will tell the system, okay, this IRN is actually the backup for my primary IRN, and we define that down here. So if I were to save this, I would say IRN 1154 is the backup extension for the primary IRN of 1234. And that just keeps everything in sync between the PBX configuration and the director configuration. Usually you always want to check both of these boxes. You want to make sure you're synchronized with the primary. If for whatever reason you wanted to have some sort of different destination for a group in your failover mode versus your primary mode, we can actually uncheck the synchronize and set up some different options if you wanted to have your system fail into a different configuration from your primary. That's pretty unusual, but we can do that. We do have that capability. So that's kind of the basics of how the redundancy works. So with the redundancy and everything set up and working, what's going to happen is if the primary fails, the call is not going to be answered by the primary server's IRN. It will then get sent to the no answer destination for that primary server's route point, which is going to be the secondary server's IRN route point, and then the secondary server will answer the call. With everything configured properly and working correctly, if the network itself is still up, if it's just a server failure and things like that, then everything will actually continue working normally. The agent experience in that case with the new web interface, they'll actually get disconnected from the web interface in the primary, so they'd see a message stating that your connection to the server has been lost. If they just refresh the page in that instance, they'll be reconnected to the secondary server and still be able to interact with the web interface for the secondary server, just the way they would for the primary. All right, so now to dig into some of the real meat and potatoes here. Let's talk a little bit. Oops, let's get all this again here. Our GCCS scripting. At one point I learned what the GCCS stood for. It's something like Global Call Control Scripting or something like that. Usually we just call this the scripter. And what this is an additional component of the call center system that lets us make more advanced call routing and informational decisions than we can do just with some of the basics. So to give you an example, on our IRNs, for our destination options, we've got choices here. In most cases, the destination of an IRN is just going to be a service queue with agents, but we can choose to have a script set as the destination here. And we'll see this option to use a script come up a lot here in Director, and there are a lot of different purposes these scripts can be used for. So for instance, another place we see this a lot is in a service on the announcements tab here. These announcements are also scripts. When we're doing scheduled callbacks, we can also use scripts here. And kind of the purpose of a script will change depending on where it's being used in the system. We've got a few different things that these are used for. So one of the big things we use a script for, and one of the major reasons we'd use a script, especially kind of right up front with an IRN, is if we want to collect information from callers. So this would be something like, if we want to ask them for some identification number, let's say if I were a pharmacy, I might ask them for a prescription number. If I'm a bank, I might ask them for the account number. Basically, any time that I want to collect some piece of information from a caller that I'm not just getting through the call itself, which generally is really only their caller ID, is the only piece of information we have kind of right away. But if I want to collect some additional piece of information from them to do something with later, we'll do that with a script. The other big thing we can do with these scripts is collect information from a database. The scripter is how we do our database dips. So basically, maybe if we've collected a piece of information from a caller and now we want to use that information to look something else up somewhere else, the script will be how we do that. We can also send a call to a script to give callers additional options. So one of the functions of a script is basically like an auto attendant option. So you can present callers, with a press 1, press 2, press 3 menu to let them make some choices on their own. We can also make logic decisions about call routing based on variables or math that we're looking at in the scripter. So if I wanted to route a call based on the piece of information I pulled from the caller or from a database, we do that with a script. If I want to change something about the call, if I want to give one set of calls higher priority than another, a script is one of the ways we can do that. If I want to change some other piece of metadata about the call, the script is how we do that. So a lot of different use cases. Finally, the fifth one's kind of use your imagination. The tool itself is so powerful, and the options it gives us are so powerful that we can really cover a lot of use cases with it. So if you have something particular in mind, like Don said earlier, we'd be happy to help you figure something out. But hopefully this will give everyone some familiarity of what's possible. So what I want to do is actually.
Sorry, let me just quickly interject. This is a great option that you've recommended there, Mike. And I want to remind everybody to use the chat and questions window. We'll continue to monitor those. But also just to add food for thought, that next to last option there, where Mike says route calls or change call metadata, priority destination, et cetera. One thing we've have been requested to do several times is to essentially adopt some kind of fast lane or priority routing for the most valued clients or board members or business owners or whatever. And as long as you've got a database with the right value set in it that we can query to determine that those folks belong to that group, and they're calling from their cell phone or whatever number you have on file, typically is what they're doing, we can do that. So keep that in mind if you want to enable some kind of fast lane or white glove or priority service, and you've got these cell phones and a database that we can query, then that's something that's been a very popular request as well.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Don. So to get into some more meat and potatoes here, what I'll do is bring up the scripter here on our server. The scripter itself is actually a tool that's part of the Supervisor Tools package. So you can run it from the actual contact center server itself, but anyone who's got the Supervisor Tools installed on their PC, like the reports, the agent manager, this is an additional tool that comes along with that pack. So any supervisor with the Supervisor Tools installed will have access to the scripter here as well. All right, so just to give you a little tour of the interface here. Over here on the left, we have our script list. So this is the list of the different scripts that are set up in our system. There are some that are basically pre-made for you to cover a few different scenarios. There's some sample music here that's used a lot of the time. You'll also notice on your system some pre-made ones for agent login and log out. It's not a very frequently used feature, but we do actually have the ability to log agents in and out and let them interact with the system, release, resume, wrap codes, all that completely through the phone, just by hitting buttons through the DTMF interface on a phone. And these scripts make that happen. Again, not a very popular option, but we do have that capability. So we do have our list of scripts here. The main window here itself is the script, and I'll kind of show you how those work here in a second. Below that is a detail pane. So if I click on any of the steps in this script, the details for each of those steps and the properties and actions associated with those will show up on the bottom. And then, of course, we got a simple toolbar up top, a new script, copy, paste, just some basic things here. So what I've actually created here is this is a simple survey demo. And what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna delete all this and we'll just recreate all this step by step here. To figure really how all this works. So let's say I've gone up here, I've clicked on new script, and now I've got a new blank script in front of me. What this is a graphical, you can almost think of it like creating a flow chart or
Visio diagram?
Visio diagram, yeah. What I'm gonna do here is work graphically with these different elements to create this script. What these elements are, you'll notice I got a couple tabs here on my side here. This palette, this is my list of actions that I can take in the script. So this is all the things the scripter can do. Some of these we never use, some of these we use all the time. For instance, like a play file. Play file is I'm going to play a WAV file, a message to somebody. We do that a lot. The give menu is another popular one. This is basically our auto attendant option if I want to present a list of options to a caller and let them choose. So I've got this palette I can use to paint my script here with. I can also get access to all these options just by right-clicking here in the main window. It'll just give me a list, and I can pick one to put in. So kind of a one we use a lot for these kind of demos is, let's say I wanted to create some kind of a survey or something where I'm collecting information from callers, asking them to select some options, and I'm going to record those for reporting purposes and get that information out later. Could be some sort of satisfaction survey, could be some other reason, but that's what we're going to do. So what I did here is I right-clicked, I chose Give Menu, and that gave me this little graphic here, which is my auto attendant option. And the way that the scripter works is all this is done graphically. So this little arrow here, green arrow that says Start, this is my call entering the script. And what we do to link these two together is if I hover over the very tip of that arrow, you'll see a little red asterisk pop up. I can click and then drag a line over to the Give Menu option here and then let go. So it's going to draw that line here to my Give Menu option. So now when a call comes in, hits the script, we're going to send it first to this menu. Now the menu itself has a few options. So right down here at the bottom, I can see kind of the contents of the menu. And really what it's asking me for first is the prompt file. So what do I want this to play? What I can do is click on my little ellipsis button here. It'll bring up a browse dialog, and it's going to show me the contents of the IVR folder on my contact center server. So one of the limitations, and this is kind of system-wide for any WAV file in a contact center server, all the WAV files that we play have to be located on the contact center server in the IVR subfolder of the installation path of the software. Generally, that's going to be on your C drive, program files, ShoreTel, contact center server, IVR. Since our system was an upgrade, it's actually this is 0 IVR again. So all of our WAV files have to be in this folder for me to see them here. You can't just browse to a WAV file on your own PC or anything like that. We have to move them to the server first. So I've recreated a couple WAV files here already. And just as a recommendation, if you want to record these and make them, I found that the easiest way to do that is to call your own extension and leave yourself these messages as a voicemail. They'll already be in the correct format. And basically you'll be able to go into your Mitel client, just right click on that voicemail, choose the download as WAV option, and you can get that WAV file already in the right format, already ready to go, just by leaving that message to yourself as a voicemail is the easiest way to do it. All right, so I've selected this WAV file as the prompt that people hear when they call. And you'll notice I got this menu of different options here on the side that correspond to the different potential button presses. So we've got 0 through 9, pound, star, and a couple of special options, the E and continue. The E is an error. So if they make some kind of option that's not valid, so let's say I've only, made 1, 2, and 3 options, the rest of them are unconnected. If someone were to hit one of these other options, generally they're going to be just played whatever this invalid file WAV is. And again, we do have put together for us by default a number of default and sample WAV files that are just included by Mitel with the system. So under the obviously English, US, defaults. I've got this invalid input WAV file I can just use without having to record one. It'll just let someone know their input was invalid. If I have an option configured here under the E, instead of playing that WAV file, it's gonna send that call to whatever the error option is here. Continue is actually depreciated. We don't use this anymore. You'll receive notifications if you try to hook something up to that. So don't worry about that one. So for this purposes of this, what I'm configuring here is this WAV file basically asks someone to please press 1, 2, or 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook 1, 2, and 3 up to a different option here. And that option is this IVR application start. IVR applications are something that we configure in Director here under IVR configuration. And all they are, just to create a new one here. These are basically just reporting objects. And they allow me to put basically tags inside a script that say, I would like to report on everything that happens either after this point or between 2 points in the call. So that's how we have an IVR application start and an end. And we can use these to track the number and duration of calls that trigger these IVR applications. So for the purposes of our demo here, I created 3 IVR applications: survey option 1, survey option 2, and survey option 3. What I'm going to do is link these 3 different IVR applications to my 1, 2, and 3 options. So survey option 1 will be our option 1. Survey option 2 for 2 and 3 for 3. So what this is telling the system to do is when these calls, organize these lines a little bit better here. There we are. When these calls hit these IVR applications, the caller doesn't hear anything with these, but the system tags the call at that point, and we can run reports against these applications later out of the reporting utility. So these are basically, think of these as tags to say, I want to collect all the information about calls hitting these IVR applications. We're going to report on these later. Now, once we've got these in, we can still do some stuff with the call here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my play file option, and I'm just going to play a simple WAV file that I recorded that just says goodbye. And I'm going to use that as the destination for all 3 of these. Said I don't have to create 3 different WAV files. If I want to play the same file in each scenario, I can point them all here at the same option. And again, we'll see some. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Don.
Sorry, one question that popped up, just to interject quickly about potentially using alternate language options like routing calls for Spanish speakers to a subset of bilingual agents. And I know you're gonna, you can address that during the process, but I wanted to mention it. That was from James. Also, just a couple of quick things to the team. If you're not monitoring the questions window, some great ideas came through. One was from Mike, another Mike client, who said that he's using the an IVR call script to route callers to collections or loss prevention based on a database dip. Like, hey, they have unpaid bills, they call for service, send them to collections first. That's kind of one way they're using it. And Michelle had actually made a comment about the script you had mentioned earlier about using DTMF for agent assignment and so on. She said they use that as a backup if the web interface ever goes down. So good catch on both those. But the question from James was about bilingual, so I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
Yeah. Let me actually cover that now, because these WAV files are kind of the perfect place to talk about that. So obviously we do have multilingual support built into the system. And you probably noticed that when we were looking at these IVR folders here, we've actually got a number of different default and sample items here already recorded for us in different languages. So Deutsch here, German, British English, US English, Spanish, both kind of European Spanish and North American Spanish, French, Italian, and Swedish. The AE, I'm not sure what the AE is, actually. I don't think I've ever used that one. But a pretty common one, definitely North American Spanish, a big one here in Florida. So what we can do is up here at the IRN level, let's say we had potentially two numbers, or we could do this as like an auto attendant, press 1 for English, 2 for Spanish. When we're bringing a call into the system, we can actually set up a separate IRN that on this call profile tab, we can define the language kind of up front when the call comes in. This is one of those pieces of metadata about the call that we have. And so when we define the language here, over in the scripter, on our prompts here, you might have noticed we have an option here. We can use a specific file, or we can match multilingual file. If I'm setting up a system for multilingual use, what we have to do is we can definitely use custom WAV files. We have to put them in, locate them under these English, Spanish, North American Spanish, locate them under the correct language, excuse me, language folder for that language. And if we say match multilingual file here, what that will do, let's see, I'm just gonna pick one out of the English here, right? Match multilingual. And so you'll notice that the file path it chooses here, we actually use a variable token for the first part. We say language path, that variable, and then the path to the folder. So we can actually mirror kind of the folder structure and WAV files in English and Spanish. And we use this match multilingual file. And what we can actually do is have a single script that we can use for multiple languages. We can actually specify the prompt as using the multilingual file. And when a call comes in that's marked as Spanish, they'll hear the Spanish prompts here. If a call comes in that's marked as English, they'll hear the English version of the prompts here instead. So that's kind of the ways we can work with the scripts in a multilingual environment, is using these multilingual language paths that are set up here in the IVR for our different WAV files. Like I said, we can change that metadata for a call here. So, if I wanted to say option 4 here, as an example, was I wanted to change the language of a call. One of the other options we've got here is one called change call profile. And this change call profile lets me change that metadata. So I can actually go in here and I can say language, and we're going to set the value to Spanish. And that's our option 4 here now. So again, a lot of different ways we can kind of do the same thing, especially when we're using the scripter. But just as an example of kind of the capabilities here. So for our survey application, I've got my 3 options here. We're going to play this goodbye. And then our last option here is just going to be hang up. And we'll route that there. And you'll notice this one doesn't have any other options we can choose after it because we're just disconnecting the call there. We'll hit save here. And this is sort of a basic survey application. If I were to call the IRN link to this now, I would get routed to this menu. It's going to ask me, please enter 1, 2, or 3. I can enter 1, 2, or 3 here. It'll accumulate those answers, basically interpreted as calls coming through these IVR applications into the CDR database. We play the goodbye file, and then we hang up. So to look at that data, we need the call center reports option here. And this is the same contact center reports we looked at during the first contact center webinar we had a few months ago, sorry. And what we'll do here is I'm just going to create a new blank report. And obviously I've got a lot of things I can report on here. What I'm going to be interested in is an IVR Applications report. Again, we have interval and date options. Interval, if I want to look intraday, kind of 15, 30-minute, hour chunks. In this case, I'll just do a report by date. And again, this is a blank report, so it's not going to have any information in here at first. So I'm going to right-click, add column. And again, a lot of options here. Not quite as many for IVR applications as other kinds. But in this case, let me look at the number of accesses by incoming calls. There are some other items here that would give me the same information, but I'm just going to pick on this one here. And then we'll set the parameters for this report. I made some test calls into this yesterday. So what I'm going to do is select all three options. I'm going to select the yesterday as my date. And my times, I'll just do kind of midnight to midnight. That's going to give me my 24-hour period here. And I'm just going to go ahead and generate this report.
While you're doing that report generation, Mike, one of the questions came in about the application, the survey application example was, what's a good way or how do you implement the survey after the call is complete? That was from Michelle. I would just first off say, and Mike, you can add some color commentary and specifics, but I would first off say, Michelle, that what we've typically done is we've worked with the client to say, let's create a transfer to survey button that instead of the contact center agent disconnecting, at the end of the call, they do a transfer to survey. That's kind of the ideal way to do it. If you want to get fancy and you've got some budget, there is an add-on professional or an add-on application from Polito. A lot of you have heard us mention them. Polito has an add-on application to do that as well, but it only works on 14.2, not Connect, where would intercept and send it. So in Connect, typically the best way is to transfer to the survey and then maybe have a report that shows you who didn't do that, so you could kind of monitor who is and who is not using that survey function. But Mike, I'd love your input as well.
No, yeah, absolutely. That's definitely the best way to do it. You know, kind of one of the unfortunate things we don't have the ability to do is kind of intercept hangups and redirect a call after a hangup to a survey kind of automatically. The way the system works technically, we don't have the ability to do that. Once an agent hangs up, the call is hung up. So we do have to transfer those callers to the survey. And like Don said, the best way to do that is you can set up a simple button for them to do that. But then obviously, you know, we're relying on the agents to do that. So you have to set up some reports to monitor compliance and things like that with it. But that's the best way we have to do it is give the agents a shortcut to transfer to the survey.
All right, great. Thanks for answering.
So here's our generated report. And again, this is just for yesterday. As you can see here, I called in a few times, 5 calls total to my little survey script here. And I chose a few of those options. So I can see I pressed option 1 twice, option 2 once, option 3 twice again. This is kind of your basic survey report. We can get a lot fancier. We can use these IVR applications to measure, obviously, some actual call duration statistics, not just the number of calls, but handling times and things like that. So maybe if you had an entire service set up and you wanted to measure, how much time callers are spending inside IVR prompts, for example, we can measure that with these IVR applications. So a lot more than just a survey we can use these for. And again, a lot of flexibility here in some of these other options that we can use. Probably our other the big one that we use this for and kind of mentioned initially was database lookups. So for that, we have the SQL execute option here. And basically, any ODBC compatible database, so that could be a Microsoft SQL Server, it could be a MySQL, MariaDB, Oracle, CSV file, Excel spreadsheet, anything that can handle structured data and has an ODBC driver written for it, we can use as a data source for these database dips. And what we'll do is we'll use the SQL execute action in a script, and we'll set up that ODBC connection to the database, and we actually use SQL to query that. So if you're familiar with that, a lot of times we'll just do a simple select statement. We do have the ability to write data back with this as well. So in some really advanced cases, we can both query data into a database, but also write data back into it. In those cases, we might do something like set up a stored procedure on the database server to handle something like that, or if we're doing a more complex lookup, we can use a stored procedure for that. Sometimes we use this to manipulate data in ways that we cannot with the built-in system, as there are some kind of built-in functions in a SQL server that we can take advantage of if we want to, trim some data, only look at turn a 10-digit number into a 4-digit number, or vice versa. All sorts of interesting things we can do, kind of adding a database server into the mix here. The most common scenarios for this are going to be, if you have like a CRM database, it's going to have people's phone numbers already in there. We can basically say, okay, take their phone number, query your database for it, and return some piece of information that'll help us make decisions about routing or priority. So I know one of our customers on the call, we have it set up so that we can do a database dip for them and send certain calls into a higher priority queue. That's a really common application, but all sorts of other ones, really anything you can think of, we can do with these database dips. So another really powerful tool we have here in the scripter.
One neat way while you're doing that, and there's a pause there, is another application to consider or think about is you could do a database dip, gather metadata on the last interaction that the caller had with your contact center, make that a variable, and potentially pass that to a web URL or some other function, so that when the agent gets the call, a screen is popped up that shows them either last interaction history or last reason for call or account history. So you can combine kind of a database dip with a screen pop and get some value out of that.
Yep, absolutely. The other common purpose for these scripts, and this is kind of a simpler purpose, I'll just point out here, is in Contact Center Director for our services here, our queues. I kind of pointed this out earlier, the announcements tab here. These are all scripts, but the purpose of these is basically just to play comfort or informational messages to your callers when their calls are getting queued or before they talk to an agent or while they're waiting. And all those messages are configured as scripts. And potentially you could do something like a database dip in an announcement script, but generally speaking, these are just going to be, we might do something as simple as a play file, where we want to play maybe some comfort messages or announcements to them. The other really common scenario, definitely, especially for places where we might have some longer queue times, is we'll configure an announcement that has a give menu option, where we can have a message that plays where maybe if they've been waiting for 5 minutes or something, we can then engage this message that says, if you no longer like to continue to hold but would prefer to leave a message in a voicemail box, press 1. And this is how we implement that. We'll create a give menu option here. We'll use a transfer option as the destination here of our press one, and we'll have a dedicated voicemail box extension set up that we can direct this call to. That'll just send that call to a voicemail, potentially a shared voicemail box or something like that. Or if you had an option where we were doing scheduled callbacks, we could say, okay, press 1 to leave your contact information for a callback. We actually have a very special step here. This collect callback info is how we collected that information for a scheduled callback. So I know a number of our customers use this feature and really love it. And this script allows us to say, okay, press 1 for that callback. And then we have a number of things we can set up here to, query them for their phone number, how many digits do we want to put in, press pound, give them some retries, play it back to them. And what's nice here is we do have pre-recorded messages for all these steps here in the sample section. So this CB, callback, collect destination, collect time, confirm, and we don't have to record custom messages here for these if you don't want to. We do have the option to just put this in out of the box with some pre-recorded recordings. But
I had a question follow-up for you there, Mike, while you're in this. Mike had asked, our client Mike had asked for queued callers or a mandatory message. I guess you could ask the caller up front if they want to take a survey after the call and add their number then to a callback database for the outbound call queue, basically. The idea being you might want to delay a callback survey. So on the front side, capture a, yes, I want a survey, then do a regular hang up, add those callers to an outbound call campaign to put them on a survey as an idea he was thinking.
You could. You could definitely do something like that if you had, so there's and this might be something for part 3. We do have a feature in the system here called dial lists. And these dial lists allow us to perform database-driven outbound calling campaigns based on, instead of having calls dial a number to reach your system, we're ingesting numbers from a database and we're telling the system to call those numbers. So almost like a scheduled callback, except we're providing that information. And that's what the dial list feature is for. It is licensed separately, so it's an add-on.
Right. But it's concurrent, so you don't have to have a lot of people in it. You could just do a single agent or whatever for dial list outbound. You don't have to have a lot of them in there. So that's a way to do it. Affordably,
we can get fancy. Yeah. We do even have the ability, this isn't designed to do agentless campaigns, really. It's designed to send calls to an agent, but we have worked around that in the past. So depending on your scenario, we can do take advantage of some tricks to perform an agentless campaign if you want to do that with the dial list feature. A lot of times, especially for an agentless campaign, there's we call that the outbound campaign IVR, a separate piece of software, totally unrelated to contact center, that can also do that for you.
The outbound campaign IVR exists outside the contact center completely. It's an application that you buy. Some of you on the call have it, but with the outbound campaign IVR, the idea here from the attendee, Mike, his point, grab the survey list, get those numbers, write them somewhere. Then with the outbound campaign IVR, use that as your call list to call and offer them potentially a survey that's agentless. But yeah, Mike, to your point exactly, you can kind of do some, even though the outbound dial list is not designed to do agentless, there are some tricks you can do to get it to essentially agent lists. You just have to be, willing to do some kind of kooky stuff with phones and licenses, but you can do it.
Yep. So exactly to your scenario, Mike, we could absolutely have a mandatory announcement on the service that says, press 1 for a survey. Now, we wouldn't use this collect callback info because that's going to hang up on them. It's designed to do a scheduled callback, but we could do a SQL execute here to collect that answer, to collect some digits from them, So this get digits option here, you can say, please enter your phone number, right? I'll delete that here. Just gonna mock this up here. We use our get digits option. We'll ask them for enter that phone number. We'll store that in a variable we call a call profile. And then we'll use a SQL action here to write that information back into a database. So instead of reading data from a database, we're writing it to the database. And then we'll use that database that we've written that information to as the input for a dial list calling campaign. So that would be how we could work that particular scenario. And then, yeah, like you said, how could you delay it? With these dial lists, we have all sorts of conditions for when we want to start those and stop those. Basically, you know, however you'd want to have it run, we could make it work.
Well, we're right about at time. So I want to let you know that we're glad to, and Mike had referred to kind of session number 3, which we're going to schedule as well in about 3 or 4 weeks. We want your input on that, so please email me personally or follow up with Brittany or Mike about what you'd like to include in that next session. We can expand on what we did here. We can go and add some other stuff. Want to make this as important as or as valuable to you as possible. So please give us that feedback. We need that to adjust the curriculum. Additional final thoughts, Mike, as we wrap this up?
No, that's pretty much all my content, so perfect time. Yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone for taking some time out and attending, and please let us know questions or suggestions for the next webinar. We will be happy to incorporate anything you have.
Thanks everybody for attending. Mike, thank you for this excellent, deep, advanced content, and we're grateful for all your support, clients, and we'll talk to you all soon. Have a great day and a great weekend ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.